to go over, so we're good. So let's just do a roll
Thank you.
call. And we'll start with Rich. Is that okay, Rich?
Sure, Rich Rita, select board ex officio.
Michael Pell, member.
Morgan Dean, member.
John Racine, member.
Catherine Brennan, alternate.
Bill Spence, member.
To go over, so we're good. Let's just do a roll call.
Oh,
Whoop.
And we'll start with Rich. Is that okay, Rich?
There's an echo in here.
Wow.
Michael Pell, member.
Morgan Dean,
Deja
member.
vu.
John Racine, member.
Bill Spence, member.
To go over, so we're good. Let's just do a roll call.
Oh,
And we'll start with Rich. Is that okay?
There's an echo in here.
Wow.
Deja vu, deja vu.
Michael Pell, member.
Deja vu, Sarah.
we all of a sudden have an echo on Zoom.
Okay.
They were trying to fix it. Sharon's on it.
Okay, here.
Mark, I do want- Mark, this was a copy of the survey.
We all of a sudden have an echo on Zoom.
Yes, hang on.
They were trying to fix it. Sharon's on it.
Okay, here. Oddly, I did not say that again.
There we go. That should have fixed it. Sarah, can you still hear us?
Yeah, it's good now.
Perfect, thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay.
It's too early in the morning for my brain to deal with an echo.
No more echoes.
Their hand up there. Oh. Hand up. Fix it, yeah.
Do you guys want-
The agenda, if you want it. Oh.
Rich, I don't know if we want the copies, there's extra copies, this was the survey. Copies
Oh,
of
okay,
the.
there's copies of this
like the
survey.
third- they're- I don't know.
Yeah, a copy of the survey. Was that attached to it?
It's
I think-
That,
I
and then
think-
this is the actual questions on the back. It's a,
Come on.
It's-
Nancy.
you want them.
You want more? She's got.
Okay.
That's the agenda, right?
Are you still recording, Sharon, or we start over?
Oh, no, it's all recorded.
So we're okay.
Yes, yeah, you all set.
Okay,
You have to acknowledge that Nancy's here.
yeah, I got Nancy on as a member, so. Just
Okay.
Nancy, just say Nancy member.
Nancy, member?
Okay. Excellent.
Okay.
On the record.
Okay, so this special meeting is, well, we got privilege of the floor, so I'm thinking. Do you guys have something you'd like to say, or do you want to get into it a little bit, and then I can stop and ask if you want to speak, or?
I
You
can
wanna
say
just-
something now, but as long as it doesn't restrain me from saying something later.
Yeah, no, I can do that too, if you like. But just come on up, Randy, and tell everybody who you are, because people are watching. We got a
Randy
good,
Reckner, taxpayer and resident. I'm all in favor of middle income, I prefer to say affordable housing in this town. I think it'd be a great asset to the community to have regular working people living here, teachers, firefighters, police, mechanics, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, just the normal people that make a community, work and their wheels turn. We need people like that. We don't need a lot more wealthy people up in Boston, God bless them, but we got plenty of those. And we need people who actually can do the work and raise their kids here. I do not want to live in the villages, north version of villages. We want to have a cross section of all generations in this town. We want them to live and raise their kids here and pass on their homes to their kids when they pass on. So that's what I think, and I think there is space in town. Mike has mentioned the property below High Country as a possible site to look at, but I'm sure we can find that. I think that's also a great site. I just think it's important that we do this for the future of this community and for the happiness of this community. Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Well,
Jane, did you want to say anything or
you said it all.
Randy said it all?
How about Tim?
And Mr. Smith?
I think everybody knows that I'm passionate about this issue and have been working on it for years, so I'm here to help with it.
Okay. Okay, great. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask Tara to step in at this point to take the lead on the topic. Is that okay, Tara?
Thank you. So I want to just give a little bit of background. I think it's helpful sometimes just to remind ourselves where we are in the context of the whole project. So the planning board voted to apply for this housing opportunity grant to first look at the data and interview employers to verify that the workforce housing is as significant as we feared it might be. With the grant, you contracted with North Country Council to do that work and me to help out with some other tasks. They certainly found that employers are reporting that they're reducing their hours and putting off expansions in some cases because they can't find employees. You've heard in different contexts that the resort may have to invest significant money into building employee housing on their own. The second piece of the project was to get North Country Council's planning director, Kayla Tavares, to be a second pair of eyes to look at your zoning ordinance and see what could possibly be amended to increase the opportunity to build housing in town that would be more affordable to the workforce. We met with the planning board and she went over those findings, identified a list of about 10 such amendments. We're in the whittling down process. The board ruled out a few as not a good fit for the community or things you wouldn't be comfortable supporting. You identified 4 to put to the voters. We'll get to the survey a little bit later this morning, but basically the voters ruled out 2 more, in my opinion. So there's 2 to maybe talk some more about. And those would be, if we can possibly think of anything we can do to the C1 that won't hurt developers, but would help with housing, and to talk more about the cottage court idea that we've thrown around a bunch of times. First, the kind of low-hanging fruit, the board had agreed that setbacks and parking were things we should include because there are ways to ensure that what little developable land is left is developed as efficiently as possible, that projects are making the best use of the little bit of undeveloped land left. So I've gone ahead and put some details to those 2 areas and sent it out yesterday, and I think you have it in a handout this morning. You should have a handout with setbacks and parking. We decided we'll get some input from the public on October 26th. We need to set a time for that. That's one thing we didn't do. But our goal this morning is to see how much further we can get each of these 4 areas to before we present them to the public for feedback on October 26th. So there's a few more steps before you're actually recommending these for town meeting. You're going to get some public input later in October, and then you'll have 1 or 2 public hearings on whatever changes you make after you hear that input. So we have some time and we have a few steps and we have a few opportunities to hear from the public. So if we could start with the first page of the handout that talks about setbacks and parking. If everybody's looking at the first page of that's titled Housing Opportunity Strategy Relax Setbacks. This is something that's come out before, and that Kayla, spotted right away that currently the setbacks in the HDR and VC for lot lines along the LDR are bigger than the setbacks in the LDR, which with her objective outside viewpoint was totally irrational. And I know that there's some history behind it and in getting different amendments passed, but it something that the board agreed we should have on this round of amendments. So this first page is really showing what you have now and what we'd be recommending you do for an amendment is just to get rid of that differential so that all the HDR, LDR, VC, the side setbacks are all 20 feet and 10 feet for the 154-foot accessory building. And not recommending any change in the C1 because that differential makes the setback the same as the LDR. It doesn't make it bigger than the LDR. It makes it the same. So thoughts?
Let me understand. I'm looking at this so that in some cases, what we're doing is we're making. So for the one on the bottom, for example, where C1 for a normal normal side and rear setback in C1 is 10 feet and LDR is 20 feet. So what you're recommending there is to lower LDR to 10 feet or increase C1 to 20
Do you
feet?
look at the middle column, Mike, where it says no change?
Yeah, oh, okay.
That's the middle column is my recommendation for the amendment.
All right, so basically what we're talking about in that case is there would be no change and it would still be 10 feet and 20 feet.
Yep.
Okay, I understand. I'm
But
sorry.
but in HDR and VC, we are recommending a change. We're recommending that the setback be the same in HDR, LDR, and VC. No matter what line it's against. Because it's really an unfair disadvantage to somebody who happens to own a piece of land in that district that's against LDR.
Except they bought it knowing it was that way.
Yeah, but it's still different.
No, I understand that it's different.
And
Right.
so in Kayla's review that she presented a couple meetings ago, she made the point with the accessory buildings that one of the things she heard in interviews is that one of the things people don't like about seeing multifamily housing is if stuff is stored outdoors, right? The picturing a bunch of kids and bikes and play equipment and so forth. So that in her mind, giving multifamily housing more of a chance to have the accessory building because it can be 10 feet like everybody else's, does away with that concern or minimizes it. So the question this morning is, are you comfortable presenting this at the October 26th public meeting for public input?
Yeah.
10 feet is not much.
No. Not from me to you.
Kind of, except, I put my arms up to you, but yeah, I mean, 10 feet. I think 10 feet is a little bit. My personal opinion. 10 feet is a little less than I'd be comfortable with. If you told me 20 feet,
But it will be 20, because your building's 20 on the other side, or 10 on the
no,
other.
I understand that.
But the 10 feet is for the accessory building.
Yeah.
The smaller building.
I understand
That's
that.
fine.
I understand what it is.
It's already 10 feet in.
It's already.
Yeah, it's 10 feet in the VC, it's 10 feet in the HDR, it's 10 feet in the LDR. It's only bigger if you're against an LDR and you're not in the LDR.
Gotcha. Yeah, I have no issue with it.
We're putting it in front of the people for their comment.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's
That's
give them
true.
their comment.
That's true. We're just putting, all this is for is to give people the ability to
Right.
say something.
Yeah. It makes sense to be consistent.
Okay,
So it's just-
Okay, so let's look at the next page on setbacks. And this is a little different. This isn't something that we've talked about in this level of detail before. And this is based on, analysis of land use and what's left and conversations with developers, business owners. What we've heard over the year, or what I've heard over the years from you guys, is the VC zone was supposed to be acting kind of like a transitional zone around,
Yes.
right, between the C1 and some residential areas. But it has this front setback of 35 feet that doesn't really act like the mixed village kind of district zone that you want. And I've heard all the concerns about the residential development that's already on the VC. So I thought, what if you adjusted the front setback for the VC based on what it's across from, so that it really does act like a transitional zone? So if it's across the street from a C1, then maybe it's 20 feet, not 10 like the C1, but 20. Or across from itself, maybe it's the 20. And maybe if it's across from the SC, the Special Civic, it's 25 like the Special Civic. But leave it 35 when it's across from the HDR or LDR. And I can draw that for the public meeting. It's a lot to think about and try to picture on the fly, I know. And I at least was glad that I got this in your hands for this morning instead of just trying to explain all this. So it's been really busy with everybody doing zoning amendments.
I apologize for being stupid, all right? But I find this difficult to visualize.
Yeah, that's why I would draw it. I'm a visual learner too.
I mean, I think if you could draw that and email it to us. Even I have access to stuff while I'm away on the ship, so that I can look at it.
One thing, and you have the zoning map on the next page, and that's why I gave you that, so you could picture where we're talking about. So if you look at that zoning map and look at where the VC is across the street from the C1, and picture that with the VC having a 20-foot setback. And there's a couple little spots where it's across the road from Special Civic, or maybe even just one. And I throw out the idea of 25 there, but leave it 35 where it's across the street from HDR or LDR. But it's really, the really thing to focus on the map is where it's across the street from the C1.
So Tara, if I'm looking at this, let's take our current development, which people are not exactly impressed with. What it would say is that building could have been built closer to the road.
Like much closer to the road.
Well. No, 'cause there was an easement for the trail. They couldn't have built any closer because of the easement for the trail.
Yeah, it doesn't take away your site plan review. It doesn't take away your ability to say, well, that's not visually appealing, or this is too concentrated and require a visual vegetative screen the way you did when we met recently about the amendment.
But keep going with what Margaret is saying. All right, and let's go and look at the property opposite the golf clubhouse, for example. All right, which doesn't have a ski trail or something there. Right, you know what I'm saying? That area. That would
Corner, are you talking about the?
continuing down from where I am.
That's C1.
Like the
That is
undeveloped
one.
tree property?
I don't know what it is. So
across
that's-
Village Road?
Yeah, so that's
Yeah,
C1,
it's
that's
Valley
currently
Road.
C1 property,
Yeah,
okay?
okay.
Yeah, you're talking about recreational across the street from C1, recreational
Yeah.
being different, but it just say if you imagined that it were
That's fine.
across the road from C1, what setback would you prefer?
I prefer 20, but
Me
I,
too.
I think 20 is a nice number. I mean, C1 is C1,
And that's what I'm recommending is 20.
20 feet.
yeah. So
Mhm.
the only thing that is 10 is C1.
Yeah, I wasn't, you can see that I'm not recommending 10, I'm recommending 20.
For discussion.
20 across the road from C1, 25 went across the road from
Okay,
Special Civic, 35 LDR.
And I can show you where,
oh, I'm looking.
I could show you where it's this little piece. On Noon Peak Road that's across from Special Civic.
That's what was that?
Oh, yeah.
Verizon?
On the corner.
Oh, the Verizon
The
building.
Verizon's on one, there's two lots, Verizon's on one and there's another lot, so there is some opportunity there.
Not much.
Yeah,
No, but I try to be thorough, you know that.
Yep.
Yep.
No,
We appreciate it.
at least we do this for the sake of consistency.
I try to be consistent anyway, not really.
I think that's what we would achieve by making any of these changes.
Yes,
I don't think that it would do anything for workforce housing.
well. That's,
More room.
I think they have a pretty high opinion of Kayla Tavares and her perspective, and we worked in a number of different places. She felt some of these could each one, if each one helps a little bit, we've helped. That's all we can do. So how's everybody? I've heard a couple voices. How's everybody else feel about adding a drawing to this and throwing it out to the public?
I think it's a good idea, yeah. People need visuals, they need to be educated of what certain things mean so that they can, make an informed decision for themselves.
You know, it might even be useful to have the kind of counterfactual of the what it would look like if you didn't do it. To
Comparative.
compare it,
Comparative drawing.
because it is kind of dumb to have it so far away. And that our whole point is to make more room for, developing.
Okay, moving on.
Oh, that doesn't matter.
I think too, Tara, we're all pretty comfortable with your suggestions.
If
Yeah.
you've ever seen my drawings, I'm gonna see if there's somebody at North Country Council who can help out with that. Since they're in the grant to help with the public meetings. So the next would be parking, and one other thing we did talk when we met before on these about reducing the parking requirement for just for an accessory dwelling unit to 1. I think everybody was okay with that. Yes?
I don't know, what's the impact of doing that?
One of the concerns people have sometimes about accessory dwelling units is you go from 2 to 4 parking spaces at a home. Now it looks like you're next to a parking lot.
Yes,
I think that for this to be open to discussion, the public and see what how they feel about it. Do they feel, if you've got a couple living in an accessory dwelling, are they gonna have 2 cars? They're gonna be going, and what's that discussion look like, how people feel about it? I mean, I think it's very clear what we're asking. Get,
well, in general, each time we make a proposal before the public makes the assumption that the planning board approves this. Or that the planning board thinks that this is a good idea and is asking the public to approve it, but, true or false, that's the impression that this creates.
Mhm.
So I think we'd better be clear ourselves whether or not we're willing to try to explain it in a manner that means that we're saying to our friends and neighbors that we want them to approve this. So I'm okay with the setback idea, but the parking spot is, I think, different. And I think that it creates a different impression. That if more cars appear to say that you, the planning board, want more cars parked next to my lot, I don't have to look at more cars.
How wide is a parking space? For
9
example,
feet.
So a parking space is 9 feet. So in order to have 2 parking spots, you need 18 feet. Approximately. Any building that is gonna be there is probably gonna be 18 feet wide. So my gut tells me that it should be, if you can continue to have 2. All right, I mean, normal garage, I don't know the last time you measured your garage, Nance, but what is it? 22, 24 feet, something like that?
Mine's 24.
Yeah, mine's 24.
Mine's extra big.
Huh?
I don't know.
Neither do I, but I mean, I happen to actually measure it for our new neighbors. And ours is about 24, 23, 24 and a half, whatever it is.
So sorry, Mike, your off-street parking uncovered is 10 feet wide.
Okay, so I was wrong. It's not 18 feet, it's 20 feet. Still 20 feet wide. I think that is where it should be. Is my gut feel.
You're saying don't change it?
I don't think I can live with saying that something should be 20 feet wide.
But right now you're saying it needs to be 40 feet wide if there's an accessory dwelling unit. And the
Well-
recommendation is that you reduce it to 30.
I don't see that there.
There's 2 spaces per principal dwelling unit and 1 space per ADU.
I'm looking at, I thought you said you wanted to reduce the parking spaces from 2 to 1.
No.
No, from 4 to 3.
On the left side of the table, single family and 2 family dwellings and 2 family
Right.
residential units, single family with ADU. Right now, it's 4 spots. And we're saying 2 and 1 for the ADU.
Right now, the top row is the language from your table right now. And
Well,
because you say 2 spaces per dwelling unit, that applies to the accessory dwelling units too. So
Yes,
one single family home with an accessory dwelling unit needs 4 spaces. And the change would make it just need 3 spaces.
Right, because basically what we're saying is. If there's gonna be an accessory dwelling unit, you don't have 1 residential unit, you have 2.
Right.
And I think every dwelling unit. All right, other than a hotel, which is a different animal. All right, I think everyone should have 2 spaces. That's kind of the way the town has been forever, and I think that 20 feet, I think something should be to have 20 feet that they can have 2 spaces.
Well, it's 40 feet if they want to have an accessory dwelling unit.
Right.
You're talking about 20 extra feet, so you're saying the same thing.
Right,
Aren't accessory dwelling units smaller?
Yes.
They're
Yes,
part of a home.
they're generally like a mother-in-law unit or
Yeah.
a nanny or, mother-in-laws. Could be
Yeah.
father-in-law, but basically it's usually just one person or,
Well, a
it's-
couple.
or maybe a couple.
Right.
But
But
it's,
if we're aiming this,
chances are they might not have 2 cars. It's like more than likely.
if we're aiming this at workforce housing, that's the probability that both people work, both people have a car.
right.
Unless you work in town.
If you're telling me this
If you
is
walk to
really,
work,
is this,
And again, not necessarily 2 people.
I understand it's not necessarily 2 people. And if that's the case, that's fine. I think that an accessory dwelling unit is going to be at least 20 feet wide.
Well, these are requirements, right?
Right,
So someone could, if you have a requirement for 3, as this would work out instead of 4, if some of that, that's the minimum.
I understand that.
So people would likely have more.
So
Yeah.
if someone wants to rent out or have a larger unit, wants to rent out, they could have more.
I understand. I just feel that it's. It should be, every residential unit should have 2 parking spaces other than a hotel.
One thing to think about, and this was actually pointed out to me when I met with James and Michael Sununo recently, and I see that James is on. If you're trying to, you are aiming at workforce housing and you're trying to make a walkable community, are you trying to encourage someone to drive from their accessory dwelling unit in Water Valley to their job in Water Valley?
But you also have a life. You've got to go grocery shopping. If maybe if
Well,
you're,
well, we're letting you have one car.
you're a single parent or whatever, you're driving, your
Yeah,
kids are in,
but
you know, you do need a car.
Yeah, but
One,
just-
but do you need 2?
Well,
If you're a
look,
couple.
you live in the White Mountain Forest, other than walking to work or taking a trail, you're gonna use a car.
So what's there's no consensus on this one. Do you want to go around the table, John, and see where the,
Well, Tara, I have a question. In what way does this take a step toward making it easier for families to live here?
it makes it easier for somebody to put an accessory dwelling unit in their home or above their garage.
Okay,
They've got to take part of their lawn away to add this parking.
Tough for them.
okay.
Or it's more flexible for them.
That's great.
I think some of the units right now have 1.5.
Yeah, our condo, that's what it is.
Yeah.
1.5.
So,
Yeah, but when we're talking about, you can
Yes.
only do one accessory dwelling unit, that we can't really do halves.
right,
Because we planners round those halves up.
but that'll come up, so it's weird how a half.
That's, yeah,
Yeah.
condo versus.
Yeah, so I'll take Tara's suggestion and see, we'll just go around the room and see what.
I have a question. Where would this apply to? Or does this apply everywhere?
Single family homes that
So-
have an accessory dwelling unit.
And 2
So
families.
this would be basically in LDR?
You have some single family homes in other districts, but mostly, yeah.
So I would suggest personally. I would do this maybe in HDR, but not LDR. I think.
I'm not sure how you could make what would be the argument? Why does one district need 1 parking space and another, the people would need 2?
I,
ADU,
huh?
for an ADU,
What do you do?
yeah, I
ADUs
mean, why
and
not
ADU.
keep it consistent across the zones that ADUs are allowed?
That's exactly, yeah, that's what we're doing here, is trying to make stuff consistent.
I understand. I do understand.
Why don't we take a?
Go ahead.
No.
Yeah. So, let's go around the room. Rich, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm fine with bringing this forward as is, as recommended by Tara for further discussion.
Mike, what do you think?
This is just to bring it forward for further discussion
Correct.
That's right.
on the 25th or 6th or whatever.
On Tara's recommendations, right?
I can bring it forward for further discussion.
Okay, I agree. I'll bring it forward.
I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with it.
Fun for discussion, it's fine.
I'll vote no.
Okay, Margaret?
I'm still not sure where there are accessory dwelling units right now.
That's also planning for the future, right? If somebody wants to put one up.
Yeah, it doesn't change any that are there now. It it would be a step toward encouraging people to,
I'm changing my
take them.
vote.
Do you want an
Say,
example?
wait a minute.
Would that help, Margaret?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where
about,
there
like,
are
the-
accessory dwelling.
Like the Beer
units now.
Briars have a separate building with a whole unit in it.
House.
You've seen their house, right?
Right,
Okay, there's an example.
I have an accessory dwelling unit,
Now, how many parking spaces do you have? 6?
something like that. 'Cause
So
it's-
Big driveway.
I understand. So you have 6.
But
The
were
Beer
I
Bri-
to rent it out, I mean, it'd be up to me to rent it, to
you
decide
did-
whether
you
they
did
want
rent-
one
you
or
did rent
two
it
or
out.
three
You
or
rented
six.
it out to a,
Yeah, but it's up to me, right,
but yeah, you have,
to decide whether I want
Right.
more than one.
but it is there. And the Beer Briars auxiliary, other
ADU.
unit,
is
All right.
not attached.
it's A, it's not attached, and B, it
Doesn't have
has,
to be.
I think, at least 2 parking spaces with it,
'Cause there's
Yeah,
no
and a
on-street
garage.
parking.
huh?
And a garage.
And a garage, I mean, so, I
But we're
understand,
talking about the future.
I understand, so, when we're talking, when the
What I'm
example.
trying to
you had-
understand is, right now, do we have anything in the zoning that allows people to put up additional accessory dwelling units?
yes, we're not changing that, Margaret.
Yeah, but do we have something right now that allows people to have?
Yes,
accessory-
we're not changing that. You allow accessory dwelling units now, and you require 2 parking spaces for them. You have to allow them under state law.
State law, we have to allow a person to be able to rent
Right,
their property and or an accessory dwelling unit.
All we're talking about is, can we encourage a couple more people to do this if we reduce the parking requirement for the accessory, for the extra, for the in-law apartment? I'm still used to calling them.
Well, again, we're just
Yeah, we're
discussing it
just-
to bring
right.
it forward for further discussion. I
It's
think
really
it's
not a
worthy of
vote.
further discussion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we can, perhaps, Margaret, we can,
Yeah, I
more
don't see a
specific
problem
about-
with further discussion. I'm just
say they
saying,
are.
I'm sitting here as an alternate planning board member, not understanding most of what's being discussed right now, what the current state is, what this means for the future, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, the top line, it's important everybody understand, the top line is language from your zoning ordinance. That's copied and pasted from your zoning ordinance, where it says single family, 2-family dwelling units and 2-family residential units all need 2 spaces per unit. And then the note below explains that this 2-family residential unit is what you call an accessory dwelling unit. That's your name for the accessory dwelling unit. And that, again, is copied and pasted from the ordinance. And then what I throw out for discussion is to add the language ADU to the table, so everybody knows what we're looking at, and reduce the parking requirement just for that in-law apartment to 1, from 2 spaces to 1.
I think the thing that is hesitant to me personally. In my tiny brain is. I see a difference in my perspective between an in-law apartment, a grandparent apartment. And a workforce housing apartment,
Agreed.
all right?
But in law, there's no.
And wait, a minute, I understand, wait, I've read the law too, Rich, I understand, and in the law, there is no difference. And I understand that there is no difference in law, therefore, I'm sitting here saying. Even there is no difference in law, therefore, I have to look at this. As if the ADU is available to anyone,
Mhm.
not. Right, not just. If my son moves here. Not just, I don't have, obviously, my parents are dead, Tina's parents are dead, all right? But whatever, so. But if, and I obviously where I live doesn't count, but. That's the difference here, so when you're sitting here saying in-law apartment. We have to understand this is not just an in-law apartment, this can be. John and Jane and their 3 kids that are coming here, and he's gonna work as a lift, whatever they are. whatever they call, work operator.
And if they wanna rent,
Operator.
if they wanna
And wait,
rent.
I
an
understand.
ADU
We have to
for one
understand
parking spot,
that-
They can rent an
Right.
ADU, one
They-
parking spot. That's the
That
point.
is what I'm saying, and if that's the case, and it's those people we're looking at, I would rather have two spaces. Because I see it in my brain, and I understand my brain.
Right, but
doesn't
they're not
always
gonna
function.
rent a place that only has one space if they have two cars. So,
Well, I don't know, I mean, there, you know.
They
They're
may-
gonna, they're gonna park in the road, they're
Yeah.
gonna
they
park in
can't park on the
Blackbird,
road
they're parking-
because it's not allowed.
No, they can't.
Yeah, okay.
So as far as the poll, what I wrote down is 4 yeses, 2 maybes, and 1 no. So I think we can go forward and plan on it being in the packet that we throw out
Yeah.
for the public
You have 4 yeses,
and,
that's
and
all.
move on to the next thing.
You have 4 yeses.
Great.
I got 4 yeses and 2 maybes, so only 1 no.
You can-
So, the next thing, so we, sorry,
I'm sorry, Tara. My
Side
apologies, I'm
conversation.
Talking over you.
so there's, one of these grants, Kayla and I are using for a community that's just looking at parking issues. And we took, we've been looking at their parking situation and the language that I wrote into the ordinance on flexible parking. And it kind of brought a thought back to the language that I worked on with you guys that's in your ordinance. And I think that and I've noticed when applicants are before the board, nobody's even seems to be looking at the language that allows some flexibility in the parking. And I think that may be because of the way we wrote it. So the rest of this page 4 and 5 is to some ways that we might help that. And I think, we've all thought and heard about the parking in the C1, especially as plans are made, concept plans to further develop that are gonna require reconfiguring some of the parking and how can we continue to work toward making that better? So one thing I noticed is that there's kind of a conflict because one section of the zoning ordinance, an entirely different section than where the table is with the requirements, says
Doesn't make sense.
it invites this parking study for flexibility. It says request for reduction of parking may be approved by the planning board with a parking study, right? So we're saying in one section, show us what you need documented. If we're not sure, we're gonna hire a parking engineer to review it. But then when we get to the next section of the zoning ordinance, the introduction to the parking table uses the word shall. The minimum number of off-street spaces required for every new or substantially reconstructed building shall be as follows. So we kind of left an inconsistency in there that's people are looking at that table and they're looking at the shall. We heard Michael and James say that they've calculated their parking need based on those numbers. And I'm thinking, well, how come? I know I put flexibility in that ordinance. Well, here's why I think that's happening. So on the top of page 5, I threw out a possible change that we combine B and C of Article 5 because they're both talking about parking, and that's always just bugged me. I don't know why you had this 2 different sections talking about parking. It should be all one, and it should encourage flexibility. And I threw out some suggested language here for how it might look for you to think about.
I have a question as I read this. So basically, what this is saying is that if someone is doing development, then they're encouraged to tell us what the parking is going to be. But they can really do whatever they want.
No, they have to document it for you. And if you're not comfortable that you agree with it, then you hire a parking engineer to review it at their expense. This is how I've done it more this way in most communities that I work with, and I haven't seen any downsides to it. I see downsides to so I can tell you that the planning community in general is recommending getting rid of those tables entirely and having maximum parking, because there's so much extra payment in the world for nothing. These tables, these minimum parking requirements have resulted in all these empty parking lots we see when we drive around commercial districts. I know that's not, you're a different situation. But you're a different situation in a positive way too, where one developer basically owns most of the commercial property and the parking. So this would let them think in a more integrated way and present you with a parking plan for the bulk of the C1. Instead of this piecemeal by piecemeal, building by building. That we don't even know now, like there's lots there that agreements were made long ago. We don't really know what they are. They're not on planning board records. I would get away from that. Because it's really contrived and it's not working well for anybody.
No, I mean, it's with a strict standard, I guess what runs through my mind is, you know, the huge open parking spots in front of a Walmart. That they're required to have that large sheet of concrete because of the size of the building. There's no flexibility. Now, that's not gonna happen here, but I think with just saying, Tara, this allows development of C1 to have flexibility, still dependent upon the planning board's approval and the site plan review.
Right, and there's good parking engineers out there who can review plans for you. If it's not in my area of expertise.
So what you're saying, just so that I understand, because for some reason my brain is only functioning at half speed this morning.
I think it's because you meet too early.
No, I've been up for a while.
My other 13 planning boards all meet at the end of the day.
All right,
It's because of Mike's brain that we meet early.
let me, yeah, that's right. So let me see if I can summarize what I think you're saying. A planning study is no longer going to be required. But they are going to submit that which they want without an actual study. We can accept that which they have suggested. However, at our discretion.
I'm sorry, I lost you a little bit ago. They need to either go by the.
It's never been required. So
Mike,
Wait, hold it,
Yeah,
hold it,
stop.
everyone.
hold on a minute. Right
Let's-
now, you have one section that says do a parking study, but you have another section that says, why bother spending the money? Here are the requirements. You shall do this. This would say you can either follow the table or submit a study showing otherwise.
Okay,
I think the
Thank you.
flexibility
That's
is a
good.
very good idea.
that's
Yeah.
good.
I think there'd be more studies and more need for parking engineers, but I think it would produce a better result.
And I think it was the board's intent when we revised the parking section, but it just didn't really come out right. I think we didn't go far enough with the changes.
Okay, I have no problem.
And if we become more flexible with our parking arrangements, perhaps we can get rid of the above ground concrete parking garages.
Mhm.
We have site plan review to make sure they don't look like
So-
concrete
We might have more. of
parking
them.
garages at least, but okay, so everybody's good with that as a concept.
Yes.
Yeah,
So the next one, the other thing we did when we made those changes was encourage creativity, like shared parking off-site, a bunch of businesses that have different seasons that are busy or different times of the week that are busy to share. But we really limited the distance, and we limited, you know, if they're staying at a hotel, they may be walking to one business, or we did a study in this other community that were just doing parking, and they have this 300-foot thing too. Well, I think it's 400 feet, but they, based on interviews with property owners, they're gonna either change the residential to 1,000 feet or do away with it altogether. So I just threw out a few things for you to think about of whether you'd be comfortable eliminating both requirements, or make them both 1,000, or just write some flexibility for the planning board into the ordinance. How do you feel about those distances? Is there any wiggle room there?
1,000 feet is about a football field.
I like option 3.
Personally, I do too. I always want to see the planning board have flexibility because you're the ones looking at the plan.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
kind of like
I
C
I
also.
three.
Mhm.
So
Like-
would you leave the numbers in there and say, so you'd leave the 1,000 and 300, but have some language that lets the planning board issue a conditional use permit to be further?
Mr. Tim? Do you know the current parking lots for the village? Do you know, have any idea how far they are from the village? Could you guess?
From
Could
Town
you
Square,
guess? What?
from Town Square?
Yeah,
Like the very back or?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously some are within a couple hundred feet and some, and if you go back to the skateboard park, you're probably, I don't know exactly, I'd be speculating, but.
Maybe 100 yards, probably.
Yeah, it's
it's
probably.
about a football field.
Yeah.
I'm just, I'm trying to say. That's the distance that we're talking, that doesn't talk about is currently what it is. Sort of.
Right.
But I don't think it would exceed 1,000 feet,
I don't think it would, I
More
don't
like-
think it would either.
more like 300 or 400.
I think it's 1, 3, or 4. I think it's, but it's less than a football field. Okay, just so that we understand. Kind of what that is.
So is the consensus to stay with the 1,300, but write in some flexibility for the planning board?
Yeah.
I would support that,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes,
I think you have a resounding yes.
I'm just trying to, good, I'm making notes so I remember what we said. All right. So those were the easy ones. The other, we go to the survey results.
Says,
We don't have a copy of it.
So we asked about, I gotta move you guys off the questionnaire. We asked, would you support a zoning amendment to limit to use C1 VC by requiring dwelling units constructed in these districts be built at a minimum density, so many units per acre? And there's enough no in here that I wouldn't recommend going any further with that. These are the voters. This went to only voters.
I agree.
So we heard the voters say no on that.
Yep.
So the next one, would you support a zoning amendment to limit new residential development in the C1 to smaller year-round dwelling units? Year-round being a key part of this question, developed only in the upper stories. And so here's a yes. And we need, and it's just one piece, the voters are just one piece. We also need to think about the market and the reality of the owners of the developable land in C1 who are trying to attract developers. And we've all agreed one of the primary goals of the town's master plan is to see that built out and have a vibrant town center. So if we think about this, I think we want to think about not taking away any rights that are there now, but to think about whether there's a way to incentivize this. Is there any way to promote and provide an incentive to do this? And I have to be honest that, I usually have an opinion and an idea, but I'm stumped on this one. I've looked and relooked at your C1, and it's so lenient already, and the setbacks are so small that I'm feeling a little discouraged on this one. And I don't know if you guys have your zoning with you, but there's no minimum lot size in the C1. And the lot coverage limits don't apply. The building height is 45, which is one of the biggest. Minimum open space for all uses is 20%. I don't think you'd want to go smaller. The setbacks are already pretty small, as we talked about, right? 10 feet. So I'm honestly stumped on whether we can do anything with this one. And I don't know if you all are smart thinking people. I don't know if you have any ideas that I haven't thought of.
When I read this, and you can tell me if I misread it. If someone builds, or when Terrell builds a new town square, and they build residential units above the stores, does that mean that those things cannot be rented? They have to be sold to people that are going to be year-round residents? I guess my question was, when I look at a year-round resident, and I don't know the answer to this, maybe Mark does, of our residents, how many of those are 6 months in a day? And we don't know the answer to this, obviously.
That would be okay, actually. You're not required, when you say year round and not short-term rental, you're not saying they have to live there all year. You're saying it can't be on Airbnb being rented out by the night or the week. Because your definition of short-term rental is transient, which is offered for rent in less than 30-day increments.
So I guess my issue here is that we're not, this isn't saying that it has to be sold to a year-round unit. It can't be used for not short-term. I think we have to define short-term.
You do, your zoning does. It defines it as not offered it would mean not offered in increments of less than 30 days. So it could be it can be month to month rentals, it can be seasonal rentals.
I'm fine with that.
But
It's an encouragement for permanence.
the issue is, how do we incentivize this without tying the hands of Terrell as they're trying to attract developers for this land? How do we incentivize it?
I guess my question too would be so we're talking about affordable housing. What is that? What price range are we for Waterville Valley? We're trying to have,
I didn't put the word affordable in this question.
but isn't though the goal, isn't that part of this goal is to have,
Well, we're trying to come at it from all different directions, because if we can just increase the amount of housing that's built, that's not huge single family homes and $1 million townhouses, will bring the price of the market down a little bit for the working person.
I had one other thought on this, and it kind of came from an experience that we had when Lenny's son was in school in New York City. They didn't have enough dorm space at the School of Visual Arts.
Yeah.
And what they actually did was rent out a floor of the hotel and put their students in there. And, wow, New York City and Waterville Valley are obviously very different. I can envision a situation in which people who had an interest in either having employees, interviewees, working in the valley in those units could sign up. For instance, the town decides we're going to take one unit and maybe there's 10 units on the floor. We're going to pay the rent on that one unit for a year. The ski area says we can use 5 or 6 of those, and perhaps they subsidize the rental and have their employees pay the rest.
Well, so what you're saying, and what I think I'm in favor of, is that if they're gonna build 20 units, pick a number,
Right,
that out of those 20 units, the resort comes along and says, I will guarantee the rent of those for a period of 10 years. I will guarantee the rent of that,
Yeah.
They're doing that, no?
yeah,
but they own them.
That's how this stuff works.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they bought,
and
they bought.
Well,
those.
and like, I think 10 or 15 years ago, the town did that for the people who were on call,
Right.
but didn't live in town, so they
Right.
had places like Golden Eagle, I think, or
Right.
Black Bear.
Yeah, we do it. We
yeah,
still do.
Yeah.
In
So-
case of emergency, yeah.
and it's an advantage for the developer, because yes, there are a couple of weeks a year where we're jam-packed. But during the rest of the year, we have 30, 40, 50% occupancy, and a lot of places are empty. And that's one of the ways that they could have some guaranteed income that would continue during those low periods.
That's a typical worker housing philosophy.
Mhm.
And different organizations guarantee a certain number of spaces.
So that's how I think something on the upper floors
Could work.
above a store could work.
Yes,
I'm gonna ask privilege of the floor. Anyone wanna say anything? You good, Brandy, right now?
I'm containing myself, thank you.
Okay, just let me know. Give me a look when you wanna.
Could I say something?
yes.
Yeah,
Thank you. This is a obviously directly relevant to us as Tyrell and also as the resort. And I think the point Tara made is an important one, that prohibiting something is probably, in my opinion, not going to get you a result you want. The reality is, for workforce housing, which is a separate but overlapping category with affordable housing. Affordable housing has limits on the income that it reduces the rents artificially to provide to a certain income level. And we haven't been talking about that. Usually that requires some kind of subsidy or a development agreement that sets aside a certain number of units. But when we're talking about workforce housing, I think generally we're talking about things like apartments, which is fine. And that's something we've been looking at. In the resorts case, we're looking at, possibly seasonal housing as well. But in the C1 zone, as Tara pointed out, it's already very flexible. The obstacle to workforce housing, and I'll just be talking about, say, apartments in general right now, is not the zoning in general. And it's to some degree, it's parking, it's the cost of construction versus what you can get on a rent. I mean, if these buildings were economical to build, they would be being built all over the place. And I know Waterville, as we all know, is in a very unique case. It's got probably the least amount of developable land, privately owned land of any town in the state. But as I've observed over the last couple of years in working with other developers or in talking to people, is we see only a couple places of workforce housing being built. They're being built in high rent areas like down here on the seacoast, where in Portsmouth you have apartments going up everywhere, but it's $4,000 for a two-bedroom apartment in some places. Or up north in places like Conway and a couple other places, you see this housing being built with subsidies of some sort, whether it's low-income tax credits or a grant program or something like that. And other than that, these significant developments of workforce housing just aren't being built because the economics just don't work. That's where things like the parking requirements come in. Like in the C1 zone or in the VC zone, if there's more flexibility on parking as opposed to rigid parking requirements, that can lower the cost of construction because it reduces the amount of land required. Parking takes up space no matter what you do. If it's surface parking, it takes up space. If it's under building, it takes away the first floor of the building. If it's underground, it's super expensive to build. So parking is a cost center, and it hurts the economics of the project. In my opinion, especially with regards to this question, as we talk to developers about assisting us with developing out that plan that you saw, that we've showed you, is if their ability to creatively build and sell units is impinged by saying that they can't sell any of the units as timeshares, or an owner of the unit can't, put the thing on as a short-term rental. Again, I know there are rules around short-term rentals in town, and they would obviously apply to any units in the core, just like they apply anywhere else. But making that even more restrictive here harms the economics of the project and makes it less likely that anything gets built. We want to find ways to integrate workforce housing into this. If, going back to the parking, if the parking requirements are not as rigid in terms of the formulas that we use to calculate that parking, and we can carve off a footprint of a garage, for example, and put an apartment building, a workforce housing targeted building in there, because now we can have 200 fewer overall parking spaces in that plan that has 2,000 spaces, and encourage people to walk or take the shuttle bus into the center of town and reduce those parking requirements. Those are the kinds of things that are going to help the prospects for building this type of housing. But in the end, it always comes down to economics. We've been talking to folks about working with them on building some of these things, some ideas in town, some ideas, on the Forest Service land. But even with those, even with essentially free land, the economics are still extremely challenging. So, working around things like more flexibility, giving yourselves the flexibility to evaluate something that it might come in that's creative and doesn't necessarily conform exactly to the zoning ordinance, but someone has taken the time to come up with a creative solution that works for Waterville in terms of the kind of business we have, that, people come into town, they're parking at their lodging, and then they're going to walk everywhere. We don't need a parking spot at a hotel and a parking spot at the commercial facility right next to the hotel, because it's the same person at those frequenting those things. So that's just my opinion here about this sort of thing. And I would ask you to consider carefully whether you put restrictions on things, because all that does is limit flexibility and limit possibilities. And the more flexible any of these rules are, the more creative people can get in trying to make the economics work. Because in the end, if the economics don't work, nothing will get built. Thanks.
Thanks, James. I'm glad you were able to attend this morning. I think it's a really important part of the equation. What if we do something in the zoning that doesn't work for the landowner, we didn't really take a step forward. And that's why I spent a lot of time looking and thinking of, is there any way to incentivize this, not put limits, but just make it easier to do this? And it kind of goes back to as you said, the parking flexibility, and maybe relax on the setbacks. So it's an unusual situation where my recommendation to the planning board is to not do the thing that rated highest on the survey.
Yeah, okay. I concur. I think that I especially with what James just said, and in speaking to developer friends of mine, I think I would be against including Q2.
And Mike, you're a strong voice, but you're not the only voice. How does everybody
I-
feel? How does everybody else feel?
Just ask around the table.
Are we good letting this go?
Go ahead.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with everything that's been said. However, we sent this survey out, and this was, again, the one that got
Came
the,
close.
the largest
It was the
result.
strongest
So
support.
how do we say, okay, but now we're not gonna even have a conversation about this? I
Because
think
we
it's,
learned, well, we learned it
Well, I
wasn't
mean,
feasible.
but also, we can talk about that too, can't we? That, you know, we can have this, so that again, it's an education opportunity to say, look at, this is the reality of this. This is, you know, people think this is a really great idea and there's a lot of positives, but also look at, here's the negatives of it and have that, you know, that's.
I
what
think
thought.
that's a great idea, rather than ignore it. I'll be prepared. We'll be prepared to talk about it at the public meeting that, you know, we looked at a way to do this and we just couldn't find it. A way that was feasible, because if we, to be blunt, if we make changes to the zoning that we know already aren't gonna fly with the market, we're just making stuff up and wasting our time.
I think the way it's worded gave people the impression that what was going to be done with the upper floors of C1 was, you know, commercially acceptable. And I think that's why it was voted yes in the majority. But in principle, I think, you know, we take the time to explain it. I think it's, you know, like a done deal. We should take it away.
So
It's
is
not-
everybody all right with that, that we talk about the survey results and explain that we, you know, explored this and it wasn't feasible?
Yes,
We have
Not-
any restrictions on what we build above C1?
Say that again?
Aside from, you know, height or whatever, do we have any restrictions on what gets built above C1?
No.
Above-
No.
So it doesn't even. have-
You allow residential development above the first floor, you allow it on the first floor.
But it could also be more commercial. Right?
yep,
Yep.
it could.
So is that something we care about, or do we not, we would rather leave it up to the developer? This place deserves 2 levels of commercial, this place deserves 1 and 3 levels of living space. I mean, I'm fine with that.
So I have, you know, to be honest, in the 6 years I've been your contract town planner, all I've seen built, you know, near, even anywhere near the town core is triplexes. So I think we need to leave it to the market and let them do what they can.
Okay.
So
So the
we're-
agreement is that we explain it, but don't present it.
don't work more on it, but
Recommend going forward.
Yeah, we're not recommending going forward with it, but we're
Wait.
explaining why we feel this way.
Wait,
right,
I'm a little confused. Is this all about making it not restricting the any dwelling units to not being short-term or timeshare, or not saying that more development in C1 needs to have commercial on the bottom?
it can have whatever it wants on the bottom.
So it can be just living space, we can just we fill the rest of the C1 with apartments.
Yeah, that's the current, that's the.
That's
problem.
what your zoning says now, and there's not been any support for changing that.
But the town does support it. Wait, I'm kind of confused. Like, why are we arguing about this? I thought, like, it's confusing to add the short-term rental and timeshare. That's like another point that got me off track.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it could have been 2 different questions, looking
yeah.
back, could have been 2 different questions.
And maybe, I think that's what we need to talk about. We need to tease those 2 out. Because people react strongly to the short-term rental and timeshare, but I feel really strongly that any development in C1 needs to have commercial on the bottom. And
There's been no support for that, for getting rid of the multifamily in C1. We've gone there.
we don't really know what those people are saying yes to, because the question's worded so weirdly.
Well, in past years and conversations, there's been no support for getting rid of the multifamily in C1, and I think, and I don't think that would work for the landowners either. I only want to, my job is to make recommendations to you that I feel will happen. Right, that are gonna result in the future that you want, looking at all the different variables, not just looking at zoning ordinance in the closet. You have so much flexibility in the C1 right now. You don't allow two family.
Right.
You only allow residential if it's multifamily, so that's great.
I think it's late in the zoning year to explore changing C1. Amending that particular zone to exclude multifamily units.
Well, we can explore it. That's the whole point of this exercise. It doesn't mean we have to make a recommendation this year or change anything this year, but
Sure.
we need to.
Right.
Can, like, look at what that
If
says.
you
Let's figure out what people are asking or answering.
I wonder, because this grant goes till July. Could we, because it is late in the year to have a whole new thought, what if, one thing I could think of that we could get some input on, for the following year would be saying that the multifamily in the C1 have to have X amount of units. And that would give James a chance to kind of think about what number might work, for him to put some feelers out and see what number might work from the developer's viewpoint.
What kind of number are you talking about?
I don't know, maybe it's 4, maybe it's 6.
All right, so let's take an example.
This is deja vu all over again. I think we've had this.
We've had this discussion multiple times.
No, what I think happened is that when James presented, he told us that Tyrell has no plans to put more residential on the lower floors.
Right.
And
Or
that it was
behind that.
encouraging
Right.
Commercial. And we accepted that and passed on it for the year.
Right.
That's what I think happened. So I think to bring this up again would be an error. Rewording this to emphasize residential that's flexible on the upper levels is about as best. as
Yeah, we
could-
can't go back and reword a survey that we sent out in August. We need to go forward with what we have.
Right.
So
But I'm not saying reword, I'm saying
That's it.
that I think we need to tease out
Bill
if-
is,
whether people were answering the short-term question or the commercial and on the ground floor, residential on the upper level question, because it both were mixed in. So why don't we just ask that at the meeting? I don't understand why we resist.
Okay,
because, well, my
Like, Tara's resisting, not us.
Well, my thought is, and James, if I can't call on you, I'm not the chair, but if John would let you respond, if I can ask a clarifying question, I thought I heard you say either one of those might be a deal breaker for you finding a developer.
Yeah, so James, can you help us out with that?
When Carrie, your question, are you talking about either one of the things in the question that's on the screen right now? Or just to
Yes.
clarify, you just said either one of
Yes.
those things. I want to be
That
sure.
if we say there's kind of two thoughts in this question, I thought I heard you say either one would be a deal breaker, either for limiting dwelling units to the upper floors or limiting them as short-term rentals, timeshares.
Well, I wouldn't characterize them as deal breakers, but the more prohibitions you put on things, the more you narrow the economic options. So, saying units couldn't be used as a short-term rental, that discourages somebody from wanting to buy a unit where if they buy a unit in another place in town, they could use it for short-term rentals if they go through the process the town requires to allow that. Which makes the units less economically attractive to someone to build and sell. Limiting timeshares again does the same sort of thing. And frankly, timeshares are something that actually has upside in that they're occupied more than, more times during the year than a unit that might be a vacation unit for a single person. So those things limit options for developers in terms of, supporting the economics of their development. With regard to the commercial, just to clarify, it wasn't that there's no residential on the first floors of the buildings in our conceptual. It's that there is commercial in both of those residential buildings that we have drawn on that plan. It's not necessarily on the first floor. It's in, for example, in the building that's over by the pond, there's a section of the building that is penciled out for the adventure center for the resort. Or for some type of adventure center and outdoor recreation for the resort. It doesn't necessarily occupy the entire ground floor, but it occupies a portion of the building. The same with the A building, which is on the opposite side of the plan over towards the Snowy Owl and the Presidentials, in that a portion of that building is penciled out for commercial, but it's not necessarily the first floor, but it's a portion of the building. So we haven't reached the point where we can specifically plan what exactly is on, in those buildings. But we do plan to have them as mixed use, not as strictly residential or strictly commercial. There are some strictly commercial smaller buildings in the middle there. And then the other buildings are mixed use, but it's not necessarily limited to, okay, the first floor is commercial and upper floors are residential, because you could have a multi-story commercial at one end of the building, for example. Or much like Town Square is, there's multiple floors of commercial in Town Square and some residential above certain parts of the building. So again, it goes back to flexibility is really what it comes down to, rather than trying to prohibit or allow things. We obviously, building out a bunch of residential here is not beneficial to, to the resort as a whole, in that if there's limited commercial activity there, that just doesn't make business sense. And I think as I talked about before, it's like there have been plans in the past where all they did was build out triplexes all over the core. And you know what? That makes a lot of money, especially in the current real estate market. But that's not what we're after here. We're after a mix that makes economic sense. And back to the earlier conversation, and we're looking for ways to layer in workforce housing into that mix, because that is going to be desperately needed to support this commercial development. Building all of this stuff in the core without being able to mix those things in flexibly, it's not going to work. We know we need places for workers to live, and we're looking at creative ways to do that. And the more flexibility you can provide us in doing that, the more creative solutions we can come up with. In the end, we have to come to you for everything. So there'll be, and this is a conceptual plan, not a plan we're presenting for approval at this point. But in the end, as we develop parts of this plan, we're going to have to come to you. And if there are questions about, what we're doing and how we're doing it, you have the discretion to have input on that.
Thank you. That was very clarifying.
Thank you.
So what I'm hearing is that a portion of the buildings are going to be commercial. So maybe that's something we can talk about at the meeting.
So what I'm thinking is, at the meeting, we get input on the amendments that we feel are, pretty ready to go for this town meeting. We're gonna have a ton of zoning amendments for this town meeting, because we've got all this. We have to do a redo of your floodplain ordinance, we learned. There's the EV charging, solar and wind, and the special event. So what if we have this conversation at the public meeting, but every chance we get, to see if there's some part of this that would help. And I'm wishing Tara all the best, but somebody else could own this property in 5 or 10 years and be in for the short-term buck, right? And we want to make sure that we see some workforce housing. So can we say this is going to be a topic that we will talk about? We have to address this question, but not agree that we're not gonna try to do anything for this year for a zoning amendment related to this. There's too many questions around it.
Sure,
Right.
that's fine.
Okay, I think we're
So-
there.
So that leaves, if we try to not talk for more than 2 hours, because things go bad after that. I think from looking at the comments on this question 3 about the cluster, we've talked about this before. I think for looking at the comments, that if we did this right, we can move this to a yes. And I think
I
it's
think-
worth, I think it's
I-
worth asking at the public meeting, because my thought from looking at the comments is people are very concerned about what it would look like, and they're really turned off by a past proposal. I wanna put on the graphic that I sent out with the cottage court layouts. And I think we could have this as a handout at the public meeting, because I'm not hearing people thrilled with the new development going in on the right-hand side on the way into town. Your zoning ordinance forced that project to be the way it is, because what they wanted to do was a 6-ish small single-family homes, but the zoning didn't allow it. Zoning said, even if you do a planned unit development, you're stuck with the 2 homes, 1 per half acre. And it's really contrary to why you even have a planned unit development section in your zoning. You're trying to encourage something like this. This next graphic it's the American Planning Association example of a cluster. In both of these, where New England is, we like our privacy. We always want to see these developments have a private green space in the backyard, but a communal area for gatherings, for barbecues, for a shared garden space. And the photos, believe it or not, these are 2 different developments in these 2 photographs. You see there's a shared space in front. You're not looking at them and seeing parking. This is what we planners, Kayla and I would like to see, if we can shape your zoning ordinance toward this. And if this wasn't, if language that we've been writing for other towns for these kind of cottage court layouts had been in place in Water Valley, you'd be looking at something more like this on that right-hand side as you drive into town.
Yeah, Tara, I think you know very well what the history of this is.
I do, and we don't need to go backwards, but I think the graphics are going to be important to show people because of that history. We don't want to see little boxes in a clear cut, each with their back to each other. We want to see a little neighborhood. We want to see a pocket neighborhood, a cottage court. We want to see it integrated like this. In this example from another state, I really like this drawing because they're all different sizes. There's a 1-bedroom that's 528 square feet. There's a 3-bedroom that's 1,117. So they're not even the same size. They all sit a little different. They all have their green space in back, their own yards. They have shared gardens. They have their own gardens.
There's some of this in Hanover, which is a relatively expensive area, and they look great.
I hate to be practical. Where in Waterville Valley, other than behind us, would you do this?
You have a couple lots left in each district that allows homes, single family homes in LDR, HDR, and VC. You have a couple lots. There's also, we need to think about redevelopment.
Yes. I think that's where it'll happen.
Someday, some lots are gonna have the aging condo torn down and could be replaced with something like this.
Mhm.
But right now, because you have no limit on the number of multifamily units, and you allow multifamily in the HDR, VC, and C1, your zoning ordinance forced that project to be just what it is.
Yeah.
And the
That's not-
applicant pointed that out, and he was spot on.
Better go, Bill.
Oh, well.
Yeah,
It
so,
you know, mad as hell and I'm not gonna take it anymore. It's we didn't want it. So I don't think you're gonna have any argument from this planning board about the proposal that's on the screen.
yeah, okay, so we agree.
If you don't wanna
So-
dig,
Where was, what zones is this gonna be good for? All zones? Again,
LDR, HDR. VC.
You allow a conditional use permit for a plan unit development in LDR, HDR, VC and C1, but you don't allow single family homes in C1, so it'd be LDR, HDR and VC. And what the things that you'd need to talk about are, some the parameters, like, so the community, I've written these for a bunch of towns, just because it's fresh in my mind, because it was last night. And one community is gonna limit them to 1,200 square feet, and give a 150% density bonus. So that's not huge. It only means if you could normally build 2 homes, you could build 3. It's not huge. Some towns go further with the density bonus.
I think my issue is. If you did this in HDR, I think I can live with that. If you try and do this in LDR. I think those people would not be happy.
Why we have a planning board, Mike.
I understand,
I
but
mean,
we're
this is
talking
all
about a zoning board. We're
No.
talking about a zoning amendment. What I'm
No,
saying
we're
is
not
I
talking
could be
about
happy with this in C1 in HDR. I don't think as a planning board person, I could be happy with this in LDR. So what I'm saying is, what I'm proposing is that this should say which zones it would be, and I think I would exclude LDR.
Let's ask that at the meeting. You would, to do that, Mike, you'd need to propose a zoning amendment to take the conditional use permit currently allowed for a plan unit development in the LDR away.
The goal is to make it easier for these sorts of things to happen. And right now, we're just discussing whether or not we take this to further public development, public
Absolutely.
comment.
Right.
So yes, let's do that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Why don't we just vote on it and move on?
Well, and I think the visuals are very important. I
Yes.
think that is
Yep.
huge. The aesthetics are important to this community, and I think that
Critical,
that's.
absolutely critical.
Yeah.
In fact, we should start with probably aesthetics before we move to, schematics.
Can we all say, vote on this? Yes? Just,
Yes.
Yeah, bring it
just throw it
forward
out
for a
there.
public
Yeah.
discussion.
yeah,
No official.
No,
vote, just
Yeah, no restrictions.
no dissent.
Yes, and move on.
Okay.
So
Alright.
this was the last thing on my list. I think at the public meeting, we could see if we could get some input on what districts and what size density bonus and how small to require the homes to be in order to get the density bonus.
Yes.
Yes.
And John-
We hear everywhere we go, we need to allow the 2-car garage even with a 1,200 square foot house, so that's. And I will give you a heads up that it was confirmed for me that the state accessory dwelling unit law wouldn't let you prohibit accessory dwelling units even on these 0 lot line developments. Their homeowners association covenants are probably going to prohibit accessory dwelling units, but we can't do it in the zoning. Just want to let you know that in advance.
Tim Smith, you had a question?
It's not a question, it's just a comment. This is a proven development technique at Crystal Mountain, Michigan. And they've had very good success there, so that would be another reference one for you.
Crystal Mountain.
In your experience, have you seen this in Colorado?
Not so much. They're multi-unit complexes with highly limited parking is more than what I've seen there. Earlier, you were talking about workforce housing and parking for workforce housing. When I lived in workforce housing in Colorado, it was an add-on to my rent to rent a parking spot, and it was quite significant add-on, so it discouraged employees from bringing their cars in. And it's another way to address some of that parking.
That's a great idea.
Hmm,
Of course, you had public transportation or a way to get to the grocery store.
Similar to here. It was very similar to what we have here.
Oh, interesting.
How did you get to the grocery store?
We found transit.
Yeah, but that's what Nancy's
Yeah,
saying.
it's like jumping on the trolley.
So, but.
To go to
grocery store-
Starktown.
we're talking
To go
about-
So it's uptown, but not to go to
Yeah.
Walmart. Oh,
No, we didn't.
To go 25 miles away,
To go 25 miles, we had the county shuttles, which we
Yeah.
didn't really use very much. I ended up just going with the work truck or with the buddy of mine or whoever to get
Yeah.
shopping.
you drove the 20 miles to whatever the store,
Yeah.
or whatever the store is.
I think the key to this, I think as Nancy and others have brought up, that'd be the visuals.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna get
Yeah.
sand trapped again into.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, and,
Chicken coops
and,
and such things.
like, you're showing us the schematic, but it's really the visuals of how cute the houses are. That this schematic's not gonna speak to people the way they,
No, I think it
I
looks
mean,
great.
it's gonna be useful, but it's not gonna be the first thing they're gonna wanna see.
How big is that lot? I can't tell from here.
I don't know.
I think that's an important.
Well, Mike, one
No,
thing
no, I
that we,
just want, think we should have that information.
yeah, one thing we could think about is whether the density bonus might be different in the different zoning districts. Like, what if 150 was for the LDR, which means
Mhm.
that we still might see the multifamily building on the right-hand side as you drive into town, because that only would have, well, if that was in the LDR, right, that could have only had 3 homes. But what if we made the bonus bigger for the HDR and even bigger for the VC? Like, his tipping point was 6, that's a 300%. Right? Because it would have allowed 2 single-family homes, and he needed 6 to make the dollars work. Because we're just making stuff up and wasting our time. We don't think about the market. So it's just something to think about, and we can talk more about at the public meeting. Whether a tiered density bonus, I think we could justify that and have it withheld of challenge. That's kind of what's my filter always too, is I don't want to recommend anything to you that would be shot down. So I'm gonna work with North Country Council to get them to do some graphics as their part. I don't know. I'm hoping we'll see Kayla in person to lead the meeting, but we can't count on it. She had surgery this week and is gonna be out about a month. So we may have to wing it a little bit on the public meeting and how that's led, but we should set a time. And did you confirm it's gonna be in your regular meeting room there?
we did not, did we?
I think it'll be,
It'd be fine in
And that's
here,
what, 26th?
We don't have a time, right?
it's.
right, not yet.
6 P.M., the usual public, is that what we're looking at?
Usually we do 6.
6 P.M.
Yep, that's good. I just want to let and North Country Council know.
Yeah,
So that's
Or
October.
public
20th.
So,
information.
so start doing some outreach, start spreading the word. That there's gonna be a public meeting on October 26th at 6 to get their thoughts on some possible zoning amendments about housing.
Might get people in.
And we can just, I don't want us waste, grant funded, housing grant funded, I am talking about the other zoning amendments, but we'll list them off for people so they're not surprised and think, whoa, we didn't know all these other amendments were coming too. Because when you go to do a public hearing, of course, they'll all be on the list.
But that's later, right, Tara?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have another thought regarding worker housing. And it would require a zoning change. And I've spoken to various people about the ability to do it. And I keep referring it to David Britton's land. And I understand that it's a flood zone. I understand what you can and cannot do. I think worker housing for maybe basically on some of the designs that I've seen. I think you could do as many as 24 to 36 worker housing units in that area.
I'm talking about condos, apartments, cottages.
I'm not doing cottages. I'm talking about a condos type style.
Yeah,
perhaps
multifamily.
to multifamily. Mixed family. I think can be done in that area.
You're talking
Is that
about
this rec land?
Yes.
Yeah,
You're
Yeah.
changing rec.
Yes.
You guys really shot that down for a possibility when we brought up allowing workforce housing in a little bit of the rec district.
We need to put the question forward.
That's all done.
So
Okay,
it does go, I think you did leave it that you talk about changing the zoning for it.
I think that if you want to talk about a place that can have workforce housing and you want to have a place where you can have 24, 36 workforce housing units of varying size. And you want to be able to do it in the next 2 or 3 years, have it done in 2 or 3 years. I think that is the area that makes the most sense.
You know
But
how you do that is you'd rezone it special civic and add a workforce housing use to special civic.
I'm throwing it out. I know we're gonna be doing changes to zoning. I know it takes time to do it. We all know that area, I think. A lot of us walk that area or bike that area or whatever. I think it can be done. I walked it, stepped some things off. God help me. Stepping off doesn't always work as far as distances, but I think it's something that makes sense to significantly look at in the next month. Well, I'm not gonna be here for 2 of those weeks, but I'll be happy to go over there this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon or whatever with people and take a look
No, but
at it.
here's the thing, Mike, we're really late in season for, we'd have to have a full-on discussion. There are a lot of implications of changing this, rezoning this. And we haven't even had any discussion on it and over the next month, and you're the main proponent and you're gonna be gone for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think you could, put it on that list that you're gonna keep thinking about for next
That's fine.
I'm
year.
not saying I haven't.
No,
I'm just saying it's late in the
Ben,
year.
all I'm saying
We've
is,
got a lot on our plate.
Yeah, we're not.
Okay. wait,
Too much.
I'm
Maybe too
saying that I understand the importance of workforce housing. And I think this is a thing that makes sense. I understand what you're saying, and maybe we put it on our plate so that we work it so that in the
25.
2025
Absolutely.
meeting, we
Okay.
have a detailed.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying you do it now. I'm saying I understand everything you're saying. I'm saying that,
Excuse me, Mike, can we move on?
go ahead.
Thank you. We understand what you're saying. It's time we move on.
Yeah.
Tara, go ahead.
I was all done and I was agreeing with Mike to put that on the list that we think about, that we keep thinking about for next year. We're available through June to help you with anything using the grant fund. So we could certainly spend some time in the spring and early summer helping you with next year's amendments. But
Yeah.
that was the last idea I had on my list, so I'm all set.
Okay, and Mike, we'll bring that, you can bring that up
I
again
think that's
later.
one of two, I think that.
Yep, good idea.
I think Nancy had one, she wanted to look at too, the possibility.
Oh, the percentage of
Yeah, how you.
commercial space.
It's something to talk
Yeah.
about for next,
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
these funds to talk
Yes,
about it.
that's on the list for talking about.
Yeah, I think those are
Right.
two great topics.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, are we done?
Any further discussion? Anyone?
I move that we adjourn this.
We're
meeting.
not done with,
Wait,
wait a
wait.
minute, we've got other things on the agenda.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
Unless you still want to move to end.
yeah, well.
Um,
Hold it in advance, it'll happen.
Rich, are you still good?
Yeah,
For
yeah, no,
time.
I'm fine.
Okay, so we're past all of that.
Thank you, Tara.
Correspondence,
There's nothing.
nothing. Committee reports to town core,
Oh, we haven't met since the last meeting.
no one's met. And conservation, we have no representative here today, so we'll have to pass on that one for now. Calendar review, oh, we'll just move forward on that because we know when our next meeting is going to be, the planning
When's the next
board.
meeting?
The,
12th, is it?
Got it.
I think
yeah, the
Yep, the 12th.
October
12th.
12th.
October 12th.
So we have October 12th and October at 8 and October 26th at 6.
Yep. Okay. And now, any other business I missed? Now,
My amendment
Secretary.
or my motion stands.
and what would that
Seconded.
be? Mr.
I move to
Secretary?
adjourn this meeting.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Accepted. Thank you very much.